The Caribbean. Turquoise waters, white sand beaches, and swaying palms. Today, it's a paradise for tourists. But centuries ago, these same waters struck fear into the hearts of sailors, merchants, and empires alike. For here sailed men and women who lived outside the law, who defied kings and nations, and who carved their names into the history books through fire, steel, and blood. These were the real pirates of the Caribbean. Forget the Hollywood versions with witty one-liners and drunken swagger. The reality was far grittier, more brutal, and at times surprisingly democratic. The Caribbean of the 1600s and 1700s was a boiling pot of colonial rivalry, overflowing treasure fleets, and desperate men chasing fortune. And in that volatile mix, piracy thrived. Picture it. The year is 1717. A Spanish galleon, heavy with gold and silver, mined from the mountains of Peru and Mexico, sails slowly across the Caribbean Sea. Its hull is weighed down with wealth, destined for the coffers of the Spanish crown. The crew keeps a wary eye on the horizon, for they know what might be lurking just beyond the blue curve of the ocean. Suddenly, black sails appear. A ship, faster and leaner, cuts across the waves, a crossbones grinning against the black canvas. Panic erupts on deck. The pirates are here. This was not a rare sight. During what historians call the Golden Age of piracy, from roughly 1650 to 1730, the Caribbean became the most dangerous stretch of water in the world. Hundreds of pirate ships roamed these seas, attacking merchant vessels, raiding coastal towns, and striking at the very lifeblood of European empires. Some pirates became infamous legends: Blackbeard, Calico Jack, Anne Bonny, Henry Morgan. Their names still echo across the centuries, wrapped in both myth and truth. But the story of the real pirates of the Caribbean is far more fascinating than any movie could capture. It's a tale of survival, greed, rebellion, and freedom on the edge of empire. It's a story of men and women who chose a life of danger rather than bowing to poverty, slavery, or the strict laws of kings. And it's a history that changed the very course of the Caribbean and the world. So hoist your sails and brace yourself. This is the true history of the real pirates of the Caribbean. To understand why the Caribbean became the beating heart of piracy, we need to rewind back to the early 1500s. This was the age of empires. The Spanish, the Portuguese, the English, the Dutch, and the French all competing for dominance over the New World. And the Caribbean, with its countless islands and its position between the Americas and Europe, was the crossroads of it all. The Spanish were the first to truly exploit the region. After Columbus's voyages, Spain laid claim to enormous swaths of territory, from the Caribbean islands themselves to Central and South America. In these lands, the Spanish discovered vast wealth: gold from Mexico, silver from Peru and Bolivia, sugar from the Caribbean islands. All of it was shipped back across the Atlantic in massive treasure fleets known as the flota system. These convoys of galleons were the arteries of Spain's empire, carrying unimaginable riches to fuel wars in Europe. But such wealth was also a magnet. Rival empires and enterprising individuals saw opportunity. Why toil in the fields or risk mining when you could take what Spain had already stolen? Out of this greed, piracy was born. In the earliest days, many pirates were not the outlaws we imagine today, but rather privateers. These were sailors who held government licenses, known as letters of marque, that allowed them to attack enemy ships during wartime. Essentially, they were pirates with paperwork. When England and Spain were at war, for example, English privateers had free rein to plunder Spanish treasure ships. Men like Sir Francis Drake, celebrated as a hero in England, were despised as criminals by Spain. The line between privateer and pirate was razor thin. When wars ended, many privateers found themselves out of work, their commissions no longer valid. But the hunger for gold didn't just vanish. Instead, many turned to piracy full-time, attacking any ship they pleased, regardless of flag. The Caribbean, with its unguarded stretches of sea and countless hiding places, was the perfect hunting ground. If the origins of Caribbean piracy were born in the smoke of early European rivalries, the golden age of piracy was when it roared into full flame. Between 1650 and 1730, the Caribbean became a stage for some of history's most notorious outlaws. This was the age of grand heists, legendary names, and a lawless freedom that terrified kings, yet captivated the common people. The timing was no accident. Europe was constantly at war. Spain clashed with England, England battled France, and the Dutch fought them all at one point or another. Colonial territories shifted hands almost as quickly as the tides. In the chaos, privateers, those who once had official licenses to plunder enemies, suddenly found themselves out of work once peace treaties were signed. What does a man do when he knows no trade but violence, sailing, and looting? For many, the answer was simple: turn to piracy. The Caribbean was the perfect hunting ground. Spanish treasure fleets carried silver, gold, pearls, and precious goods from the Americas back to Europe. Ships from England, France, and the Netherlands hauled sugar, tobacco, and rum. And let's not forget the slave trade, where ships filled with human cargo were forced across the Atlantic to fuel the plantations of the New World. Every one of these vessels was a floating fortune, and every one of them was a target.
When people imagine pirates, they rarely think of nameless raiders on the high seas. Instead, they picture icons, men and women whose deeds blurred the line between history and myth. Their faces, etched into folklore, still glare from wanted posters in museum archives. Some were brutal killers, others brilliant tacticians, and a few accidental celebrities in their own lifetimes. Together, they gave piracy its unforgettable legends. 1. Blackbeard, the terror of the seas. No pirate name inspires more fear than Edward Teach, better known as Blackbeard. Towering, broad-shouldered, with a thick black beard he'd tie into braids and lit with slow-burning fuses during battle. He was less a man than a walking nightmare. Imagine the scene. His hair smoldering, smoke curling around his face, eyes blazing red from the firelight, an apparition of death itself bearing down on you with cutlass and pistol. Blackbeard's flagship, the Queen Anne's Revan, was a floating fortress armed with 40 cannons. His reign of terror stretched from the Caribbean to the American colonies. But his power didn't come solely from violence. It came from psychological warfare. Blackbeard knew terror was the strongest weapon. Sometimes he wouldn't even fire a shot. Ships surrendered at the mere sight of him. Yet, beneath the monstrous image was a cunning strategist. He wasn't wantonly cruel. In fact, few accounts record him murdering captives. Instead, he cultivated his terrifying reputation because it made resistance pointless, and resistance cost time and lives. His death in 1718 off the coast of North Carolina was as dramatic as his life. Surrounded by British naval forces, Blackbeard fought ferociously, taking 5 musket balls and more than 20 sword wounds before collapsing. Legend says his headless body swam around the ship 3 times before sinking beneath the waves. A myth, perhaps, but one that sealed his immortality. 2. Henry Morgan, the gentleman buccaneer. If Blackbeard was the demon of the seas, Sir Henry Morgan was its devil in disguise. A Welshman turned buccaneer, Morgan made his fortune not by chance raids, but by calculated military campaigns. Backed by letters of marque from the English crown, he blurred the line between pirate and national hero. Morgan's most famous exploit came in 1671, when he led over 1,200 men to sack Panama City, one of Spain's richest strongholds in the Americas. The march across the jungle was brutal. Starvation, disease, and ambush haunted his forces. But Morgan pressed on. When Panama fell, it wasn't just a raid, it was an invasion. The city burned, its wealth seized, its people scattered. Unlike many pirates who ended their lives at the gallows, Morgan thrived. He returned to Jamaica, knighted by King Charles II, and even served as the colony's lieutenant governor. He died wealthy, respected, and powerful, a pirate who had transformed blood and fire into legitimacy. For those who dreamed of piracy as a path to greatness, Morgan was proof it could be done. 3. Calico Jack Rackham, the stylish rogue. Not all pirates built their reputation on terror or empire. Some, like John Calico Jack Rackham, are remembered more for their flair and infamous company. Nicknamed for his colorful calico clothing, Rackham was less a brilliant commander than a charismatic figure who lived fast and died young. But Calico Jack's legacy is stitched into pirate culture forever because of one symbol, the Jolly Roger flag. His version showed a skull above two crossed swords, a stark emblem of defiance that became iconic of piracy itself. But Calico Jack's legacy is inseparable from the two women who sailed with him, Anne Bonny and Mary Read. Together, they formed a crew that mocked gender norms and terrified their enemies. When Rackham was finally captured in 1720, it was Anne and Mary who fought like demons, refusing to surrender while the male crew cowered below deck. Rackham was hanged, but his legend lives on as the flamboyant pirate who gave piracy its most enduring image. Blackbeard, Morgan, and Calico Jack weren't the only pirates of their time, but they were the ones who captured imaginations. Their stories combined fear, freedom, and defiance against a world ruled by kings and empires. Each embodied a different face of piracy: terror, ambition, style, rebellion, and discipline. Together, they gave the Golden Age its heroes and villains, its myths and its cautionary tales. And though their careers were often brief, sometimes just a few years, their shadows stretch across centuries. The romance of piracy often overlooks the harsh realities of life at sea. Pirates were not lounging in tropical havens every day. Their existence was physically grueling, dangerous, and unpredictable. Yet, amidst the hardship, they created one of the earliest examples of egalitarian societies at sea, structured by rules that even kings would envy. A pirate ship was a microcosm of democracy. Before each expedition, a captain was elected by the crew, often because of charisma, experience, or bravery in battle. But power was not absolute. If a captain made poor decisions or abused authority, the crew could vote him out. Alongside the captain were officers such as the quartermaster, responsible for discipline and dividing plunder. The surgeon treated injuries, often with primitive tools and little anesthesia, while the carpenter ensured the ship remained seaworthy. Battles were chaotic, terrifying affairs. Cannons roared, muskets cracked, and the smell of gunpowder filled the air. Injuries were common, and death lurked at every turn. Yet pirates had a code of conduct that brought order to this chaos. Loot was divided according to rank. The captain and officers received larger shares, but even ordinary crewmen were guaranteed their portion. Serious infractions, desertion, theft, or mutiny, were met with whipping, marooning, or execution. Despite the violence, pirates often lived in what could be considered a fairer society than many European nations of the time. Pirate life wasn't only at sea, it extended to land-based strongholds that became infamous in their own right. Port Royal in Jamaica was the first major hub, attracting privateers and pirates with wealth, opportunity, and debauchery. Taverns overflowed with stolen gold. Women, merchants, and adventurers converged to profit from the pirate economy. Tortuga, the French stronghold off Hispaniola, became a base for the Brethren of the Coast, an early pirate coalition. Here, pirates could repair ships, trade goods, and plan raids. Fortifications like Fort de Rocher protected them from Spanish attacks, while governors occasionally granted letters of marque, legitimizing some raids under state sanction. Nassau, in the Bahamas, later became the legendary Pirate Republic, where pirate captains governed collectively. The lack of formal authority allowed a diverse population of English, French, Dutch, and African sailors to coexist. Democracy, equal distribution of plunder, and egalitarian principles made it the most famous pirate haven of the Golden Age.
No golden age lasts forever. By the 1720s, several factors led to the decline of Caribbean piracy. Peace with Spain. Treaties and alliances reduced legitimate targets. Fewer letters of marque were issued, leaving many privateers unemployed and tempted to turn to outright piracy. Naval suppression. European powers expanded navies and hired pirate hunters, often former pirates themselves, to capture or kill outlaws. Governors strengthened fortifications in Nassau, Port Royal, and Tortuga. Economic opportunity elsewhere. Some pirates sought stability in plantation economies, trade, or service in European navies. The risky, irregular income of piracy no longer outweighed the dangers. Internal conflicts. Pirate crews increasingly fragmented along national and personal lines. Rivalries, mutinies, and betrayal weakened cohesion and made them vulnerable to capture. By 1721, piracy in the Caribbean was significantly curtailed. Famous figures like Blackbeard and Calico Jack had died, while others were executed or forced into retirement. Nassau and Port Royal, once bustling pirate hubs, transformed into colonial towns or military outposts. After the Caribbean became too risky, many pirates turned eastward to the Indian Ocean, following what became known as the Pirate Round. These voyages circled the Cape of Good Hope to target trade ships of the East India Company, Mughal India, and Arab merchants. Ships returned to Caribbean or North American ports to offload treasure, spreading the legend of piracy far beyond the tropics. Pirates like Henry Every exploited the vulnerability of these trade routes, amassing enormous wealth and temporarily evading European authorities. The Indian Ocean raids mirrored the Caribbean model: democratic governance, elected captains, and codes of conduct. Yet the stakes were higher, distances longer, and dangers more unpredictable. Success required not just brutality, but strategy, navigation skill, and alliances with local rulers or indigenous tribes. Even after the Golden Age ended, pirates lived on in stories, newspapers, and eventually novels. Figures like Blackbeard, Anne Bonny, and Henry Morgan became archetypes, fearless, cunning, and untamed. However, myths often distorted reality. Pirates didn't commonly make victims walk the plank or speak in a theatrical "arr." They were, by the standards of their day, ruthless yet disciplined. They adhered to codes of fairness, recognized individual rights within their ranks, and built communities governed by consent. These principles, democracy, equality, freedom, and meritocracy, remain perhaps the greatest legacy of the real pirates of the Caribbean. The dramatized depictions we see in modern media may exaggerate their flamboyance, but they capture the essence of a people who challenged authority and seized opportunity on their own terms. By the mid-18th century, Caribbean piracy was largely suppressed, but the influence of these pirates extends far beyond treasure and terror. They pioneered egalitarian governance at sea, demonstrated daring and strategy in military raids, and created lasting cultural legends that shaped how the world imagines adventure, rebellion, and freedom. Pirates were products of their time, born from colonial rivalry, economic opportunity, and the harsh realities of life at sea. They were men and women who defied empires, reshaped trade routes, and left indelible marks on history. Their codes of conduct, democratic practices, and audacious exploits echo in literature, cinema, and the popular imagination, reminding us that even lawless individuals can leave behind a structured, inspiring, and enduring legacy.